Good morning. Welcome to Yin Yoga. Let's start today. We'll start in tadpole. So it's similar to child's pose, but it's a little bit different. You'll come to hands and knees, big toes together, just like you would for child's pose. But now you have the freedom to bring the knees a little bit wider than child's pose if you'd like. You can stick with the traditional child's pose if that's better. Hips go back toward the heels. Unless the knees need more space, then you keep the hips up. Arms walk out in front of you if the shoulders are okay with that. If they're not, and it's just like one shoulder, then you can just bring that hand and arm in or even back behind you if it needs that kind of space. If your shoulders are fine, keep the arms out in front of you. And don't feel like you have to push the hips back right away toward the heels. Just let them sink down on their own. And you'll start to feel a rounding of the spine just by staying in the shape with as little effort as possible. Start to take a deep breath in through the nose, back out through the nose. 2 more like that one. Deep breath in, slow breath out. One more time together. Inhale in through the nose. And exhale back out. Keep going on your own with this breath. Elbows can be heavy on the mat. You can even have a bend in the arms if you want. Don't feel like the arms have to be very straight. So that there's a heaviness to the shape. It's that weight that pulls you a little deeper into the pose. Still staying away from your edge. And you'll do that for all of these poses. Set yourself up, get yourself into it, and then let go. So you're not forcing the pose, but you're allowing the pose to take you where you need to be. And we'll start to lift the head up. Come up to hands and knees. So stack the shoulders over the wrists, separate the feet. Knees and feet are hip width distance apart. Let's do a few rounds of cat-cow breath. Take it easy on the inhale. Reach the heart forward, lift the tail. On the exhale, round the whole spine, chin in toward the chest. Keep going at your own pace. Follow your own breath. Maybe keep the eyes closed if you're comfortable with that. One more cycle forward and back. And you'll come back to a neutral spine. So you can do this next one without any blocks, but if you have blocks, it might be nice. So you'll step the right foot up between the hands, and you can either rest the torso right on top of the thigh, this right thigh. You could bring the right side of the torso inside the thigh. That's a little bit deeper. Hands can be down on the mat. They could be on blocks if the mat feels far away and you need to keep the chest up a little bit higher. But we're coming into the first of, it's a lunge, but it's also called dragon in yin yoga. It's a nice hip opening. And we're staying in the lower body with this one. That back knee, you could tuck the back toes and scoot that back knee a little farther back if you want to, trying to get above the kneecap. So just above the bottom of the thigh. And sometimes that doesn't work out. It just depends on our hip mobility. So if it's not happening, it's fine. Now take the right hand inside the right foot, heel toe the right foot to the outer edge of your mat, coming into a wide lunge. And then you can spread the hands so they're more like shoulder width distance. You can stay right here. You can come down lower onto the forearms. Coming down onto the forearms straight to the mat could be a big transition. So here's where blocks can be nice. You can stack them or just use one, kind of just play Legos with your own body, trying to figure out where you get the best alignment and support using the blocks. So this is what feels good for me, but you're probably in a different place than I am. Don't feel like you have to be exactly here. Try to keep the toes on the right foot pointing forward for now. You can stay where you are. I need to come up a little bit higher for this next one. So left hand underneath the shoulder, right hand to the right thigh. You're turning these right toes out, maybe halfway, keeping the knee and the toes going in the same direction. You can flare out the knee a little bit, coming onto the outer edge of that right foot, maybe opening the chest to the right, coming into a winged dragon. Then come back onto the sole of the right foot, heel toe this right foot in so the right hand can easily go outside the right foot. And this time, let's walk the hips back, walking the hands back, straightening this front leg. Push the heel forward an inch or two and start to reach the chest forward. So not as deep as you can go in this half split shape. You can also use blocks underneath the hands here, come up high onto the fingertips, whatever you need. The lower you go with the hands, the deeper the opening, and you're trying to stay away from your edge. So just go 3/4 of the way in, maybe less into the pose. Hands back makes it gentler. Hands forward toward that right foot makes it deeper. So figure out where just right for you is on this side. And see where you can ease up. Backside of the right leg will open just by being here. You don't need to do anything. Next up, focus on your breath. You can let the eyes close. You can let the head and the neck go. Last breath or two here. Start to shift forward onto the sole of the right foot, hands down underneath you. You're coming back to all fours, tabletop. And once you get there, we're doing the same thing on the other side. So if you feel like you want more padding underneath that right knee, get that set up. You can fold the back of the mat in, step the left foot forward. And this is our low dragon, our baby dragon. So chest can rest on that thigh. Maybe it rests inside of the left thigh if that feels like a good place for you to be on this side. Take your time with it. Hands could be on blocks, staying right here. Maybe you tuck the back toes and scoot that right knee as far back as you can. It's not going to go that much further than where it is. And some of us, it's not going to move at all, and that's fine. But you can feel with the chest lower how you're putting some weight on that left hip, starting to get that open. Let's bring the left hand inside the left foot, heel toe the left foot out toward the outer edge of the mat, and then you get the hands underneath the shoulders. Chest can reach forward. Those left toes point forward. Back knees as far back as you can get it. Maybe you stay here. If you feel like there's more room on this side to bring the chest lower, you can do that. Maybe coming down onto the forearms with or without blocks, or whatever you have. It doesn't actually have to be blocks at all. It can be whatever you have near you that you can rest the forearms on. You can let the head and the neck go. Maybe close the eyes. Listening to the sound of those long inhales and long exhales in and out through the nose. Maybe you stay here with the chest, or you can lift it up higher. Turn those left toes out to the left. Open up the knee out to the left. Maybe the hand comes to the thigh and you open the chest to the left. If it's too deep, you can keep the chest going forward, coming into your winged dragon. Outer edge of the foot is on the mat. The inner edge is lifting away from the mat, trying to keep that left knee in line with the left toes, pretty much always. And start to bring the sole of the left foot back to the mat. Toes point forward. If you haven't already, come back up onto the hands. Set the blocks off to the side just so you can transition. Left foot comes inside of the left hand. Shift the hips back. Walk the hands back, coming into your half split. So the legs are hip width distance apart again. You're reaching the chest forward. Starting to get yourself set up. So maybe the hands are up a little bit higher, maybe they're lower. It could be more underneath the shoulders or more ahead of the shoulders toward that front foot. Go part of the way in, stay there. This one is a longer hold, so the backside of the left leg will be great after this. Maybe you let the head and the neck go. So in yin, we're not as focused on form. So when we're doing an active version of this pose, we have the spine long. We're not in it as long. So we're trying to go deep a little faster, especially once the body's warm. Yin, it's different. You can round the spine. You can let the head and the neck go. Find some ease and relaxation while you're in these shapes, since it's a much longer hold. Last several breaths in this shape before we move on. And start to lift the head up, shift forward onto the sole of this left foot. Bring the left knee back down underneath you. And then bring the feet to one side. Come to seated on the mat, legs out in front of you. You'll probably need to shift forward so that the hips are more toward the center of the mat. A block would be nice for this next shape. We're coming into supported bridge. If you don't have a block, you can lie on your stomach and do Sphinx pose with the forearms underneath you. You don't need any props for that one. So come on down. A pillow also works, or a folded blanket underneath you. But if you have a block, that's ideal. So walk the feet in. You want the heels to be underneath the knees. Press into the feet, lift the hips up. Let's start with the block either on the medium height or the lowest height. So find one of those that feels comfortable. And you can always start with a lower one, work your way higher. Like once you have the block or whatever you're using underneath the hips, you can let the hands go. Palms can face up. Knees point straight forward. So sometimes the knees want to splay out. Try to keep them straight forward so you keep the thighs long. Maybe you lift the chest up to get the shoulder blades underneath you. So you feel a lifting and spreading across the center of the chest. Then from here, extend the right leg forward. So the heel's down on the mat, toes are pointing up, and you'll feel an opening on the top of the right hip, the pelvis there. If this bothers your lower back or your hip or anywhere, just bring the sole of the right foot back in. No big deal. Stay in supported bridge. But sometimes you can get a nice stretch happening with this back bend. Slide the right foot back in underneath you. Let's try the other leg. Left leg goes forward, heel down on the mat, toes point up, chest is still lifted. There's a slight toning of the belly, so you keep that support across the lower back. Slide that left foot back in underneath you. So this time we can do both legs out if we want to, or stay right where you are with both feet on the mat. If you'd like, slide one leg out in front of you, heel down, toes up, and then see what it feels like to get the other leg out. So it's a deeper back bend, chest is still lifted. You've already done half the shape, doing one leg at a time, which is a nice way to get prepped for this. If it doesn't feel good at any point, bring the feet back in, come back to supported bridge. You can let the legs relax, especially with the heels out in front of you. The legs will stay straight. And the tail's pointing forward toward the heels, not down toward the block. That keeps the length long in the lower back. And it also keeps a nice opening on the top of the hips. And you'll start to walk the feet back in, coming back to supported bridge. Lift one leg up. See what that feels like. You're checking the hips to make sure they feel even underneath whatever you have supporting the hips. If that feels good, bring the other leg up. Now we're coming into an inversion, just reversing the blood flow in the legs. So instead of the blood going down toward the feet, moving away from the feet. Chest lifts, throat's open, so keep the chin away from the chest. This is a shape that you would want to skip. And if you are wanting to skip this, the feet would just come back down. You do supported bridge. So you want to skip this if you're menstruating. You want to skip this if you're dealing with glaucoma, high blood pressure, a cold. Keep the arch in the back, chest lifted. Sometimes as we get relaxed in this, the back starts to round. So just a friendly reminder. But the legs don't need to do anything. They can be completely relaxed. You just have the feet up. This also can be done against the wall. Very effective. You'll start to bend the knees, bring the feet back down to the mat, find supported bridge again, block underneath you, chest still lifted. Press into the feet, lift the hips up. If you have the block on the medium height or highest height, lower it down to the lowest height. If you're already there, stay there. Feeling a difference between where you were and where you are now, or maybe it's the same place. Press into the feet, lift the hips up, slide the block out from underneath you, bring the hips all the way down onto the mat. So we were there for quite a while. No doubt you're feeling a difference in the height of the hips. It's always amazing to feel that difference because when you first come into it, it doesn't feel that high, but when you come out of it, you feel the difference, how significant it actually is. Hug the right knee in toward the chest, leave the left foot right where it is. Feeling that spreading across the back of the hips, lower back area. Set the right foot down, hug the left knee in. Left foot comes down to the mat. You can do this next pose without any props. Just bring the knees and the feet together. If you do have a block, take the block the narrow way between the thighs down by the knees, so not all the way up. And then wherever you are, press into the feet, scoot the hips over to the right, bring the knees to the left. So the block between the thighs gives your lower space. Gives your lower back more space. That's why we have it there. Right arm reaches back behind you. Maybe the hands in line with the shoulder. Gaze can start to fall over to the right, but just be easy on the neck. Don't feel like you have to look all the way over. Hips are stacked, so that right hip's on top of the left hip. And if this is bothering the shoulders at all, you can always bring the right arm down by this side, and that'll take away some of the opening in the upper body, the upper back. Some people like to bring the right arm way up overhead. That's another option. But now that you're here, maybe the eyes closed, staying with your breath, just letting the pose marinate. You'll start to bring the head back to center. If you have anything between the knees like a block, set it off to the side. Bring the feet to the mat, finding center on your back. This time, bring the knees in toward the chest and hang on to the knees. Knees and feet stay together. Move the knees around in a circle, feeling the hips move underneath you on the mat. So this is our counter out of that twist before we transition over to the other side. And then you'll take the knees going the other way with your circles. Nice and slow. Feet will make their way back down to the mat. If you're using the block, bring it back between the thighs, down by the knees. Press into the feet, scoot the hips over to the left. Knees come over to the right this time. Left arm reaches back behind you, and you're coming into your reclined spinal twist on this side. That left arm's probably in the same place it was on the other side, so hand in line with the shoulder. But if you have something going on and you need to modify, definitely do that. You'll start to roll the head back to center, set the block off to the side, soles of the feet to the mat. Make sure you find center on your back first, then bring the knees in, hanging onto the knees and feet together. Start to find those circles, going in whichever direction calls first. Keep the circles slow and easy. They're not that big, especially with the hands on the knees. You can only go so far with it. Switch the direction, go the other way. Then setting the feet back down onto the mat, you'll roll over to your right side. Use the left hand to bring yourself up to seated. You can slide the block up toward the top of the mat. You're coming to hands and knees, tabletop. Then once you get to hands and knees, walk the hands forward so they're ahead of the shoulders on your mat. This is just a transition. Tuck the toes, lift the hips up and back, coming into a downward facing dog, just so you can walk the feet up toward the hands. And once you do that, you'll be in a forward fold at the top of the mat. Widen the feet a little bit so they're wider than hip width distance. We're coming into dangling. So you can clasp opposite elbows. You can have a bend in the knees. Let the head and the neck go. And if you feel like the heels are heavy, see if you can rock forward a little bit more into the balls of the feet. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want some weight in the balls of the feet. So you'll make note of which forearms in front. There's always one that you like to cross first. Remember that for later, so that when we come back into this, you'll switch the clasp of the forearms and bring the other forearm in front. Hands come down to the mat. So lift the chest. You can bring the fingertips right underneath the shoulders. Turn the heels in and the toes out. You're coming into a yogi squat. So some of you can bring the hips all the way down. I'll give you options if you can't. You could use blocks underneath the hips and set the hips down on the blocks, and then you can get the hands up, and this could be a nice yogi squat. You can also adjust the height of the block so they're there. If the heels, and you're just coming right into your squat if you can. If the heels are lifted, then you can just bring the hands in front of you and keep the chest going forward, and this is where you stay. Heels down, then you can play with bringing the elbows inside of the knees, hands come together, chest can stay lifted. And then once you start to find your rooting down into the feet, the legs, opening up the hips by opening up the knees, maybe you close the eyes, come to your breath. This is our peak pose, your yogi squat today, Malasana. It's such a great pose to hang on to as long as we possibly can in these bodies, some version of it. And it's not always the easiest shape to be in. If you need to take a break at any point, you come back to dangling, that forward fold that we were doing before. Take as long of a break as you need, and then you just come back if you feel like you want to explore this a little bit more. Wherever you are, find your breath. With these longer holds in a squat, you might feel some heat in the ankles. That's also opening up that area of the body. Almost there. Last few breaths. Maybe feeling some heat in a different area of the body, maybe the back. Okay, bring the hands down if they're up, straighten the legs, turn the toes to point forward, but keep the feet wide, clasp opposite elbows the other way. So other forearm in front. Let the head and the neck go, and you dangle. Let the head and the neck be released. Get the weight a little heavier in the balls of the feet. That's how you start to open up the back sides of the legs. You can have as much of a bend in the knees as you want, although after that squat, you probably want the legs to be straighter. Okay, so hands come back down underneath the shoulders. You can lift the chest up halfway, heel toe the feet to hip width distance. If you have blocks, make sure they're nearby. Maybe you even bring them outside the feet if you have to. If you don't have them, you can do this without blocks, fingertips to the mat. Left foot steps back behind you like you're coming into a runner's lunge. Set the back knee down. Come back into half splits. So walk the hands and the blocks back if you're using them. Lift the toes on the right foot. Push that heel forward. Chest is reaching forward. So we've done a lot of work on the legs, the hips today. Maybe you stay right here. You could explore a fuller version of splits by tucking the back toes, scoot that back knee as far back as it'll go. Here you'll have more space to scoot it back. At a certain point, if the hands are ahead of the shoulders, you need to walk them back. And you're finding some gentle version of splits in your body, but you are open. So just see where it is. Maybe you untuck the back toes. If that right hip is down pretty low, you can slide a block underneath it and stay there. So it looks like this. If not, you stay in the version of some version of fuller splits. If you can get the hip down on something, maybe you reach the arms up. And you can even bring the hands together back behind the head. So this way you're getting a little bit of an upper body shoulder opening. Eyes can be open or closed. These are all options. You're finding something that's working for you. Focus on the legs first. And then if everything's going really well, then you can start to work in the upper body. But it's just something to do while you're in this shape. If you have the hands back behind the head, reach the arms back up. Bring the hands down by the sides. Let the shoulders release. Stay here. Feel the neck get a little bit longer as you rise up through the crown of the head. You can look down, you can close the eyes, but keep them soft. We'll start to make our way out. So hands come down. If you have a block underneath you, you need to lift the hips up high enough so you can get that block out from underneath you. And then tuck the back toes, start to scoot that back knee in. If you're in a fuller version, you're coming back to half splits. Hands can walk forward. And then once you get there, sole the right foot comes to the mat, set the blocks off to the side. Well, I guess you could keep the blocks underneath the hands. That'll be easier. Tuck the back toes, lift the back knee, step that left foot up to meet the right foot and switch sides. So right foot steps back, find that runner's lunge, lifting the chest, setting the right knee down to the mat. And now you'll start to shift the hips back, walking the hands and the blocks back. Start with half splits. So lift the toes, push the heel forward. So we're all in half splits. We can feel what this shape feels like. Maybe this is where we stay. Maybe we start to explore a fuller version. If you want to explore the fuller version, tuck the back toes, start to scoot that back knee far back, walk the hands in, get the hands underneath the shoulders. That's a key thing to do. If you don't do it, then you can only go so far with the back leg. So you keep walking the hands, lifting the chest. Maybe once you find your spot, you untuck the toes, top of the foot rests down. If the hip is low enough, you can slide a block underneath the hip, keeping the chest lifted. And you still want the legs to be hip width distance apart. So don't let that right foot go out to the right too much, especially if you're in a fuller version. And then once you feel like you're in your place, if the hands and the arms are free, you can reach the arms up. Helps you get a little bit more space in the spine so everything isn't just sinking down into the lower body. Maybe the hands come together and back behind the head. So you're pointing the fingertips down toward the mat. You might find that this shape was more accessible on one side versus the other. That's really common, especially with this one. It is a hip opening, lower body opening. We're adding the upper body if you're doing that part too. And this is also a dragon. It's called dragon splits. So we started with that lunge, which is a dragon, and then we just extended the legs. Reach the arms up, they're back behind the head. Start to bring the hands down by the sides. Let the shoulders relax, be heavy. Keeping the legs. And with the hands down on the mat, if you have a block underneath you, lift the hips up, grab that block, place it underneath the hands, tuck the back toes, start to inch that right knee forward until you're back in that half split shape. You'll have to bring the hands forward a little bit. Then you can shift forward onto the sole of the left foot. Maybe the blocks go forward, tuck the back toes, lift the back knee, step that right foot up to meet the left foot. Blocks can go off to the side. Bend the knees, bring the hands down to the mat, step back to a tabletop. So bring one knee down and then the other knee down. Feet come over to one side. You're coming to seated on your mat, legs out in front of you. You may need to scoot yourself forward so the hips are in the center of the mat. Now we're setting up for Shavasana. You can do a traditional Shavasana just lying down flat on your back. but it might be really nice today if you have a blanket or a bolster. You can even use the blocks underneath the knees to get some elevation there, especially after that last shape. So if you have a bolster or a big pillow, put that underneath the knees, scoot forward so the hips are up against the bolster. And then when you lie back, you can straighten the legs, let them relax. And then if their feet or anything else is touching anything, shoo that out of the way. So the blocks were touching my feet. I'm not actually using them, so I don't want to be touching them. Arms down by the sides. Lift the shoulder blades up, lift the chest up so you get the shoulder blades underneath you. And feet a little bit wider, toes turned out, start to sink into your shavasana. So let the body become heavy, feeling the hips become a little bit heavier, feet start to relax. You can let go of your breath control. Final relaxation pose, shavasana. You'll start to wiggle the fingers and the toes. Reach the arms overhead, finding a stretch. Start to walk the feet in, bending the knees. Rolling over to one side, maybe the right side, cradling the head and the arm, knees together, just lying in the fetal position with the eyes closed. Using the left hand, press yourself up to seated. You'll come to a comfortable seat. You can sit up on your prop or just on the mat. Sitting up tall with the eyes closed. Closing our practice together, bring the hands in front of you, bow the head, take a moment, honor and acknowledge your heart and your spirit. as well as everyone around you. Bring the head back up, blink open the eyes. Namaste. Thank you. That was pretty intense work on the lower body today. Hopefully, you feel a difference there. And I'll see you Thursday for flow or next week again for yin. Thank you.